The night Meng Tingzhou's childhood sweetheart came back. He gave me two choices: zone, become a co-wife; two, divorce. I chose the latter, but when writing the divorce papers, I discovered I was pregnant. So I kept silent, slipped him a sterilizing drug, packed my things the next day, and returned to Lingzhou, disappearing without a trace ever since. 10 years later, Meng Tingzhou, now the Marquis of Yongning, was being criticized and overwhelmed because he had no children after all these years. I brought along a child whose eyes and brows resembled his. On the streets west of the capital, I acquired a shop. 10 years after the divorce, I returned to the capital once again. It started when Zhang'er's tutor came to me, saying he had never seen such a naturally gifted student. Only 9 years old, writing poems and policy essays, critiquing current affairs. Every word a gem. He said this child had a boundless future, and if possible, I should take him to the capital to find better teachers, so as not to waste such promising talent. I replied, "All right." I went back to take stock of our assets, converted them to cash, made simple preparations, then hired a carriage and horses, traveling 1,000 miles, arriving in the capital. I rented a residence in the west of the city and acquired a shop, planning to run a business later. It all happened so quickly, no more than a month or so, because I knew this day would come sooner or later. On the way back from registering at the academy, I rested my chin on my hand, lost in thought. Zhang'er lifted a corner of the carriage curtain, curiously looking around. This is Vermilion Bird Street in the heart of the capital, where nobles gather, luxury carriages come and go, young lords and noble ladies dressed in splendid attire, and even the servants following behind are all well-groomed and presentable. I suddenly spoke up. "Zhang'er, do you like it here?" He nodded vigorously. "Yes. We used to live in Lingzhou, and though it was a land of fish and rice, abundant and prosperous in terms of wealth and splendor, it was far inferior to the capital." The carriage passed by the Yongning Marquis Manor, with its carved beams and painted rafters, magnificent and grand. I raised my hand and pointed. "How about mother makes you the master of this place some day?" He turned his head. "How could that be possible? Mother always keeps her word." Though Zhang'er had his doubts, seeing how certain and serious I was, he cooperatively nodded. "Okay." I curved my lips into a smile. After all, he is the offspring of Yongning Marquis Meng Tingzhou. The only offspring. 12 years ago, I married Meng Tingzhou as his wife. He was the third son of the Yongning Marquis. Above him were two older brothers, one brilliantly talented, serving as an official in court. The other was the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, a loyal servant to the emperor. By all reason, inheriting the title would never fall to him, and he could simply live his life as a carefree idler. But for me, this marriage was climbing as high as one could possibly climb. Me parents died early, leaving me weak and without support, so I came to the capital's minister's manor to seek refuge with my great-aunt. Meng Tingzhou was close with my cousin and often visited the minister's residence. Over time, we became acquainted as well. We both loved playing the qin and often practiced together in the bamboo grove. Spring gave way to autumn. Flowers bloomed and withered, and feelings gradually grew between us. One day, after finishing a piece, I suddenly bid him farewell. "I am sorry, young Master Meng. I gave him a music score I had treasured for a long time. Perhaps today is the last time I'll see you. Take this as a keepsake." He was quite surprised. "Why?" "Because I am getting married." Though my birth was unremarkable, I was indeed beautiful. After my coming-of-age ceremony, many came to arrange matches for me. A few days ago, a matchmaker sent a card asking me to meet with the second son of the Vice Minister of Rights. My aunt said it was rare to find someone with good family background, proper appearance, and willing to take me as his legal wife, so I should present myself well. We looked at each other in silence for a long while. Meng Tingzhou suddenly spoke. "I'll marry you. What?" I thought I had heard wrong. I said, "Zhang Jie, I am fond of you. I want to marry you." The Marquis of Yongning's household wasn't something just anyone could reach, let alone someone like me, merely a cousin's niece. Me aunt was overjoyed and quickly turned away the other matchmaker to arrange my wedding. Life after marrying into the Marquis of Yonging's household was smooth and worry-free. Me-in-laws were easy to get along with, and the sisters-in-law were harmonious. We loved each other, and our marriage was blissful, but good times don't last forever. The second year after our marriage, Li Shiner came back. The Li and Meng families were on good terms, and the two of them were childhood sweethearts. When she was 12, Li Shiner's father offended His Majesty and was demoted, so their whole family moved to Linan. They hadn't crossed paths in all these years. Now His Majesty remembered their old friendship and reinstated him to his former position one day. Meng Tingzhou was returning home from work when they happened to meet on the main street. Li Shiner looked at him with resentful affection, as if wanting to speak but holding back, then quickly walked away. Just that one glance. It left him unable to eat or drink, unable to sleep well for days and nights. "I want to take an equal wife." When Meng Tingzhou said this, I was embroidering a sachet for him. Me hands paused, the needle pricked my finger, and blood seeped out. Looking at the man before me, I felt only unfamiliarity. Just a few days ago, he was still being affectionate and intimate with me. That day, he went to a social gathering and saw that all his colleagues had sachets embroidered by their wives, but he didn't. When he came back, he kept pestering me to make one for him. But I only knew how to play the chin. I wasn't good at embroidery. After being worn out for most of the night, I really couldn't take it anymore, so I coaxed him by saying I'd try. So why did he suddenly change his attitude today? He didn't notice my shock and continued speaking to himself. I never expected that, after so many years, Shiner still remembers the affection between us from back then. She remains unmarried to this day. Facing her now, I truly feel guilty. So I must make it up to her. Li Shiner moved away with her father when she was 12, and I moved into my grandaunt's house at 13, where I met Meng Tingzhou, completely unaware of this. So why should I be wronged to compensate her? Meng Tingzhou held my hand and consoled me. "It is fine, Jiyue. She is just going to be an equal wife. She is straightforward and speaks her mind, but she is not a bad person. Once she enters the household, you two will definitely get along well. No need to wait for later. I've already seen it for myself. One day, I went to a jewelry shop and ran right into her. Her expression was arrogant, pointing at me with her chin. I recognize you. So you are the one who seduced third brother. I was forced to step back. I didn't. Who'd believe that? Her smile was mocking, her tone aggressive. With your shabby background, if you hadn't used some foxy tricks to seduce him, how could you have climbed up to a good family like the Mengs? Don't you know how to write the words shame and decency? My thoughts returned to the present. Meng Tingzhou was still rambling on, envisioning the future. Jiyue, just put your heart at ease. Even after Shiner enters the household, my love for you won't diminish one bit. I interrupted him and asked, "What if I refuse?" His brows furrowed, his tone questioning. "Why can't you be more sensible and consider my position? Now that Lord Li has been reinstated, Shiner's status is above yours. Surely you don't expect her to be humiliated as a concubine. If you are unwilling, then we'll have to divorce. Let's see where you can go without me." With that, he strode away. With my back to him, I closed my eyes, wearily fine. Then, let's divorce. The small study was cold and desolate. I spread out paper, ground ink, and wrote the divorce letter. I didn't know if it was from excessive grief or something else. The evening meal brought over beside me, I had no appetite and didn't touch a single bite. The greasy smell crept into my nostrils. I felt nauseous and dry-heaved. Xiaotang seemed to notice something. She grabbed my wrist and took my pulse. She was my confidant, skilled in medicine, as expected. "Madam, you are pregnant." Her voice trembled. "Your position in the Marquise's household is secured." My brow twitched. "Poor child. You didn't come earlier, you didn't come later. Why did you have to come at this moment? Even if I stayed, not only would I have to endure that fickle bastard of a father of yours, but also deal with that scheming Li Shiner, her family background, Her ties with him, she has me beat in everything. What kind of good life could I possibly have? Xiao Tang wept with joy and made to run outside. This servant will go tell the Marquis and Madame right away, so they can stand up for you. But I stopped her with a sharp command. Stop. You are not allowed to go. This matter stays between you and me. Don't breathe a word of it. I sat quietly through the night, listening to the rain. If I quietly miscarried this child after the divorce, Meng Tingzhou wouldn't know and wouldn't feel any guilt. In the end, the only one hurt would be me. If I don't find a way to get back at him, I truly won't be able to accept it. The rain pattered on and on. A thought slowly surfaced in my mind. The next day, Meng Tingzhou walked into the small study. I heard from the servants that you've come to your senses? Yes. He thought my parents had died long ago and I had no one to rely on, so I surely couldn't bear to give up the Marquis' manor as my support. It is good that you've come around, Ji Yue. I knew you would. His words stopped halfway through. He saw me with a calm expression, presenting a divorce agreement and 2 cups of tea. Aunts, we drink from these cups. All ties between us as husband and wife are severed. Don't worry, after the divorce I'll return to Lingzhou. My ancestors left behind some modest property there, enough for me to support myself. I certainly won't be in the capital to be an eyesore to you two. Why must you do this? Meng Tingzhou looked puzzled. Jinner has already agreed. As long as you soften your stance and get along peacefully with her from now on, you'll still be my wife. But I didn't waver in the slightest and drained the tea from my cup. Having heard that my lord has divided loyalties, I've come to make a clean break. Then I pushed the other cup toward him. The story of your reunion with Li Xiner has already spread throughout the capital. The common people all praise you, Meng Tingzhou, for being loyal and righteous. A true gentleman, hesitating like this now, unable to make a decision when you should. That is not how a gentleman acts. So please, fine, just fine. He was unwilling to accept it, his hands clenched tightly into fists. After much deliberation, what finally came out were only spiteful words said in anger. Zhang Jiyue, you've gotten used to living a life of luxury in the capital from now on. Don't come crying with regrets. With those words, he drained the cup in one gulp. But what he didn't know was that I had already put a generous amount of colorless, tasteless sterilization drug in the tea. I, who had lived under someone else's roof in the capital, cowering and timid for so many years, finally, right before leaving, did something big in my own cowering, timid way. I opened a chin studio, teaching the art of chin to make a living. Thanks to my exceptional skills, I quickly gained some fame in the area. All my students knew I had a jade bone Yao chin. It was an heirloom passed down from my ancestors, the only one of its kind in the world. It was said that its strings produced a sound so pure and melodious, like music from the heavens. I treasured it dearly, wiping it clean every day. Yet I had never played it in front of anyone. When someone asked why, I would just shake my head. Back then, I played Phoenix seeking his mate on this chin in the forest, and with that one song, a young lord and I pledged our love. But sadly, later on, he and I severed all ties. The day I left, I swore I would never play this chin again in my life. The story spread far and wide, and quite a few people came to the chin workshop to watch the excitement. But I wore a veiled hat every day and never showed my face. The more mysterious it was, the more people wanted to uncover the truth. Some even gathered all the chin players in the capital, made a list, and started taking bets. Meng Tingzhou was among them, speaking of which, he has been quite the famous figure in the capital lately, talked about in every street and alley. Over the past 10 years, the Meng family's eldest young master fell seriously ill, and the second young master was unfortunately hit by a poisoned arrow while apprehending a criminal dying on the spot. The Marquis of Yongning title that should have had nothing to do with him ultimately fell into his hands. Unfortunately, the Meng family's ancestral grave probably had some issues. This third young master also had some hidden ailment. He married 2 wives, one after another, yet didn't have a single heir. Old Madame Meng planned to have him choose an heir from the first or second branch to adopt. He was burning with anxiety, worried sick. The common folk grabbed some melon seeds after meals and chatted about it with great relish. How can an adopted child be as good as one's own? Exactly. Exactly. A man who can't have children. What is the difference from a duck that can't lay eggs, working hard your whole life, only to end up making wedding clothes for others? In early June, the palace examination results were announced, and the capital was quite lively. Rumor had it that praying for academic success at Jing'an Temple was always very effective, and every year many successful candidates would go up the mountain to fulfill their vows. With the idea of getting some good luck, I went too. In the great hall, I held incense to honor the spirits and knelt in devout worship. First, I wish for Zhonger's bright future. Second, I wish for my desires to be fulfilled. Never did I expect the divine to hear my prayers so quickly. Just as I left the temple and was halfway down the mountain, the carriage ahead suddenly stopped. Inside the carriage, an elegantly dressed old madam had fainted midway. Unconscious, several maids frantically carried her out, while the two young ones accompanying them were so frightened they were wiping away tears. It turned out she couldn't handle the exhaustion and bumpy ride, triggering her heart condition. But in this desolate wilderness halfway up the mountain, where could one find a doctor? With a life at stake, I pulled Xiaotang and hurried forward. "Don't panic, my maidservant knows some medicine. She'll surely be fine." They quickly made way for us. Xiaotang always carried silver needles and emergency medicine with her. Her movements were swift, checking the pulse, inserting needles, administering medicine. Then she gave some instructions on things to watch out for. Before long, the old madam let out a long breath and slowly came to. "Grandmother." The young miss threw herself into her arms. "These two kind people saved you." The other noble lady bowed to us. "May I ask the names of our two saviors and where you reside? Another day I'll have my father come to pay his respects in gratitude." I know this old madam. She is the Marchioness of Yunyang, who has been close friends with Meng Tingzhou's mother for years. She used to visit the manor often, so naturally she has seen both of us. Worried about being recognized, I pulled my veiled hat tighter, covering myself completely. "You are too kind, noble lady. We just happened to be passing by and offered our help. It is a trivial matter, not worth mentioning." I bowed and bid farewell. "There is a young child waiting at home, so it is really inconvenient to stay here long. I'll take my leave now." The Marchioness of Yunyang watched our carriage gradually disappear into the distance. She murmured, "Why do I feel? That maidservant beside her looks somewhat familiar, as if I've seen her somewhere before." Her memory was hazy at the moment, and she couldn't recall. Who could it be? After returning from Jing'an Temple, the speculation about me grew more intense, spreading from the west of the city to the east, and then throughout the entire capital. I figured that if these words could spread throughout the capital, they could also reach Li Shiner's ears. Just to be safe, I no longer let Zhonger go to school, but hired a tutor for him instead, keeping him by my side at all times. Zone evening, I saw off the last batch of students, tidied up the music studio, and prepared to go home. A group of people suddenly barged in through the door. A woman with an unfriendly expression, thugs and burly men with fierce looks. They came aggressively. "It is her." The woman at the front pointed at me and shouted, attracting nearby passers-by to come watch the commotion. What she teaches is nothing but third-rate techniques. She is completely misleading her students and made my child embarrass themselves in public and become a laughingstock. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'll smash this music studio to pieces. Don't you dare slander me." I raised my voice. As for my chin skills, all the neighbors and students here can vouch for me. If you truly have a clear conscience, come with me to the magistrate's office. The truth will be determined there. She was strong, grabbing me and making to drag me outside. Mother. Zhonger tried to protect me, lunging forward to bite her hand, but several burly men behind him grabbed his arms and easily threw him to the ground. In the struggle, my veiled hat fell off. After seeing my face clearly, she became even more certain. She shouted loudly, "What are you lot waiting for? Smash her shop." Then she yelled at the onlooking crowd, "How do you think this widow and her child managed to settle down in the capital? She must have seduced plenty of men behind closed doors. Don't you all agree?" Quarreling, smashing, crying, murmuring from the crowd, all intertwined into chaos. In a flash, a figure swept through the crowd and landed before me. The troublemaking woman was kicked to the ground. "Insolence!" he roared in fury. "This marquise is here. Who dares cause trouble?" Meng Tingzhou. He had heard the recent rumors, but never dared to confirm them until today, when that woman tore off my veiled hat and saw my face clearly, finally proving everything. The troublemakers were taken to the authorities, and the onlookers who had gathered to watch were dispersed. The commotion gradually faded, leaving only the three of us. After so many years, meeting again had become unfamiliar. He rubbed his hands, his tone awkward as he spoke. "Jiyu, were you frightened just now?" I didn't respond, walked right past him, and took the child's hand. "Janger, let's go." The chin shop was only 2 streets away from where we lived. Walking there took just a quarter of an hour. Meng Tingzhou silently followed behind us like this, always keeping a distance that was neither too far nor too close. Just as I was about to close the courtyard gate, he finally couldn't hold back and stepped forward to stop my movement. "Zhang Zhuye, I helped you out of a tight spot today, and you won't invite me in for a cup of tea." I turned slightly to the side, making way for him. The Marquis holds such high position and power, this commoner woman naturally wouldn't dare object. The room was simple, the furnishings plain. Meng Tingzhou in his luxurious attire looked out of place here. Xiaotang went to start the fire and boil water, while I found a tea cake from the cabinet. "We only have loose tea at home. It is a bit astringent. I hope the Marquis won't mind." He looked around the room, then watched me skillfully washing the tea utensils. There was a hint of emotion in his tone. "Before, your hands were only used for writing, painting, playing the chin, and arranging flowers. Now you have to do these chores. Could it be that you and your son have been living like this all these years? They say it is hard to go from luxury to frugality, but as long as you let go of your pride and accept it calmly, it is fine. Making a living with my own hands isn't shameful." My tone was calm. When we were in Lingzhou, things were a bit better than here. It was only later, when the teacher at the school said he was naturally gifted and hoped I could find him a better teacher, that I brought him back here. I thought living in the capital is never easy, and there would be many expenses in the future, so we cut back on our lifestyle a bit. A few books were placed on the table. The topmost one had a name written on it, Meng Ruzhang. He half squatted down, his gaze level with Zhanger's, looking at those eyes and brows that were 80% similar to his own, and remained silent for a long time. He said in disbelief, "Mine." I had imagined today's scene many times in my heart back. Then he didn't truly want to divorce me and cut all ties. On the contrary, because I had withdrawn too quickly, he even had some lingering feelings. Therefore, for me, playing the emotional card, acting weak and pitiful, retreating to advance, that was the simplest and safest approach. The temptation of the Marquis Manor's power and wealth was too great. To achieve my goal, what is wrong with temporarily lowering my head and playing along? I picked him up. I deliberately turned away, not looking at him. My voice was stubborn. "Anyway, this child has nothing to do with you. You and I have long since settled our debts. My affairs are none of your concern. What happened at the instrument shop earlier? You insisted on meddling." Hearing the words "settled our debts," he instantly lost his composure. He stood up, his tone urgent. "Zhang Zhuye, you think I'd believe that? Divorcing me while secretly giving birth to our child, is this what you call settled? All these years you've been raising the child alone. Why didn't you say anything? Being ostracized and bullied in the capital, why didn't you say anything? You knew full well that if you just asked, I wouldn't have ignored you." "Eno," Meng Tingzhou, shut up. I lost control of my emotions. tears streaming down my face, shouting loudly, "Do you think back then I truly wanted to give up the wealth and glory of the Marquise's residence, request a divorce myself, and go live a hard life? It was all because I loved you." The moment these words came out, like thunder from a clear sky, the expression on Meng Tingzhou's face froze on the spot. This was the first time in my life I discovered my acting skills were this superb. I gritted my teeth, secretly pinched my thigh hard, and pressed on. I didn't want to share a husband with other women. I couldn't tolerate your love being given to anyone else besides me. How I wished I could pretend to be magnanimous and kind, not jealous, not making a fuss, so I could stay by your side forever, but I couldn't do it. You'll love another woman the way you loved me, write her the same love poems, take her to see the same spring cherry blossoms, be in perfect harmony with her, deeply in love. Just imagining such scenes drives me nearly mad. What can I do? What else do you expect me to do? Besides divorce, what other choice do I have? Now that you've heard me admit it with my own mouth, are you satisfied? Getting into the act, I casually grabbed the teacup from the table and hurled it at him as if venting my frustration. Meng Tingzhou didn't dodge, standing there like a statue at this moment, in his eyes. Me behavior right now was anger born from love, resentment born from love. He strode forward and pulled me into his embrace. "Jiyue, I am so happy. You have me in your heart. You can't forget me, right?" I was tired from acting, tired from shouting. When I opened my mouth, my voice had become much hoarser. Yes, after the divorce, I actually discovered I was pregnant. What does that mean? It means you and I are destined to be entangled in this ill-fated bond for life. There is no escaping it. Now that so many years have passed, I no longer hate you. As long as I can see you now, I have no other wishes. I closed down the Chin workshop. Under Meng Tingzhou's arrangement, I moved into another residence of his with Zhong'er after. He goes back to prepare for a while, pay respects to the ancestors, update the family records. He'll bring Zhong'er back to the family residence to be formally recognized. Samanon was causing trouble for me, and he swore to pursue the matter to the end. Of course I knew who the mastermind was and what their purpose was. Li Xiner learned of my return before Meng Tingzhou did. She wanted to make a move on Zhong'er, but found that I kept him by my side at all times, giving her no opportunity. So she resorted to smearing my reputation to disgrace me and make me too ashamed to stay in the capital. But the investigation was dropped halfway through. Meng Tingzhou had already found witnesses and evidence, and he went to confront Li Xiner. The two of them fell out and had a huge argument. He called Li Xiner venomous and heartless, and she cursed him back for being fickle. In the middle of their argument, Li Xiner suddenly fainted. When the household physician checked her pulse, he discovered she was pregnant. The arrival of 2 children in a row left Meng Tingzhou so excited he didn't know what to do with himself. That day, when Meng Tingzhou came to Shuiyun Courtyard, he looked somewhat uneasy. I poured tea for him, and when he took the cup, his hands trembled twice, nearly spilling the tea. He tried to speak several times, but stopped himself each time. I put on an understanding expression. "What is wrong? Does the Marquis have something on his mind?" "It is about the Marquis Manor. I originally planned to bring you all back these days, but unexpectedly a small complication came up." A trace of guilt flashed in his eyes. "Xiner is pregnant. You know how she is, bad temper and pregnant now. She can't handle any upset. You and Zhang are coming back to the residence. We might have to wait a bit longer. Once she safely delivers the child, I'll bring you both back. Is that all right?" I knew it. This matter would never go smoothly. Before I could speak, Zhong'er had already grabbed his sleeve first, looking up at him cautiously. "Daddy, when you have a little brother or sister, will you stop wanting me and Mommy?" "How could that be?" Meng Tingzhou held the child up and lifted him high. "Whether it is you or your siblings, you are all my own flesh and blood in my heart. You all weigh equally." I felt sick to my stomach. Yet I had no choice but to squeeze out a couple of tears, pretending to look reluctant and longing. "All right. As long as you don't forget me and Zhong'er, we're willing to wait however long it takes." He let out a long breath of relief. Li Xiner's temperament over the past 10 years. He'd dealt with it plenty. He thought today's matter would take a lot of effort and persuasion, but unexpectedly, not only did I have no complaints, I was also quite understanding. This surprised him, and at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment. People are never satisfied standing on this shore while busy gazing at the scenery on the other. After Meng Tingzhou made his promises, he hurriedly left. The moment the door closed, Zhong'er and I immediately dropped the expressions we'd been faking for so long. "Mother, is what he just said true?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but Mother can tell you a story." He was quite curious. "What story?" "Before Mother divorced him." He also said the same thing. He said that even if he married Li Xiner, I would still be his wife, and he wouldn't mistreat me in the slightest. But look! Now Li Xiner is so aggressive, throwing dirty water on us mother and son, almost making it impossible for us to stay in the capital. He knows the truth clearly, yet he refuses to give us justice, not even the slightest punishment for her. So, can you still believe what he said about you having the same importance as the other children? He shook his head. Then he walked to the table, spread open the book pages, and sat upright like a little adult. "Mother, I understand. Now one's fate must be in one's own hands. Besides oneself, no one can be relied upon. Even without returning to the Marquise's mansion, I can rely on my own studies to pass the imperial examinations and earn a good future for Mother." I stroked his head and smiled. "Good child." After this, Meng Tingzhou came to Shuiyun Courtyard every few days to sit around. It wasn't that he cared so much about old feelings, but staying in the Marquise's mansion was too suffocating. Li Xiner, relying on her pregnancy, became increasingly unrestrained with her temper. Yet Meng Tingzhou didn't dare talk back, and could only let her vent every time he came here. The next time he returned, scratch marks could be faintly seen on his neck. To hide them, he had no choice but to wear a high-collared robe in the scorching dog days of summer, and I would only be considerate helping him apply the ointment. "If it is really difficult for you, it is fine not to come see Zhong'er." He held my hand. "How could it be difficult?" "But you living here, have you been mistreated? If you've been lacking anything lately, just tell me." I withdrew my hand without a trace. "If possible, I want your jade pendant." Though I had no worries about money, my status was lowly. In this capital city, whenever I tried to ask for help with anything, I hit walls everywhere. Now with the Marquis Manor's token on me, whether I was taking Zhong'er to visit renowned scholars in the capital, or hiring secret investigators to look into the suspicious things behind Li Xin, everything would be much easier. Half a year later, Li Xiner gave birth to a baby boy named Meng Ruyu. The entire Marquis Manor was filled with joy, decorated with lanterns and festoons everywhere. Meng Tingzhou said he wanted to put bringing Zhong'er back to the manor on the agenda, preferably before the full moon banquet, so they could celebrate together. Li Xiner couldn't stay calm upon hearing this. "This concerns the Marquis Manor's reputation. You want to acknowledge this child of unclear origins." "I don't agree. Marquise, you don't know this, but some days ago, I already had people investigate her background thoroughly. She gathered all sorts of evidence, making quite a scene, determined to make Meng Tingzhou see my true colors. I couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. She really was full of energy. It had only been a little over a month since she gave birth, yet she still had the strength to pull all this." The front hall of the Marquis' manor. Li Xiner sat in the seat of honor, her tone interrogating. "I sent people to investigate your neighbors and fellow villagers from when you lived in Lingzhou. They all said that although you and the Marquis divorced 11 years ago, you only returned to Lingzhou 9 years ago. By then you had already given birth, and no one can vouch for the child's actual birth date. As far as I know, the journey from Lingzhou to the capital takes only 3 to 4 months. Who knows what you were doing during that year and a half you disappeared?" I recalled the scenes from back then and calmly began to explain. "After the divorce, I didn't discover I was pregnant until the 3rd day after leaving the capital. The carriage ride was bumpy, and I had severe morning sickness, so I traveled slowly. Unexpectedly, halfway through the journey, I encountered floods in the south, and a group of refugees were fleeing northward. I was carrying silver and dressed well, yet looked completely defenseless to protect myself. I had no choice but to stop in Yaozhou and lay low for a while. Later, when the danger passed, my pregnancy was already far along, so I simply gave birth in Yaozhou, recuperated for over half a year, and then made my way back to Lingzhou. Old Madame Meng's eyes flickered slightly. Her eldest son contracted a lung disease while managing flood control under imperial orders 10 years ago and became gravely ill. Meng Tingzhou tried to smooth things over from the side. All right, Shinner, when it comes down to it, our marquis residence also has its shortcomings. If we had sent a few guards to escort her the whole way back then, there wouldn't be all this controversy today. Besides, look at this child, he is practically carved from the same mold as me. How could he possibly be fake? Not necessarily. She still had a second trump card. There are so many people in the world who look alike. How hard could it be to find another one? Bring that adulterer up here now. She clapped her hands 3 times. The servants quickly brought up an unfamiliar man. His name was Xiao Ke, a wandering swordsman of the Jianggu. He voluntarily confessed to having had a brief affair with me, claiming to be Zhang'er's biological father regarding this emotion. He described it vividly. Madame was traveling halfway through her journey when one day the sky grew dark. Someone saw she only had a maidservant with her, vulnerable and alone, and tried to take advantage of the situation. Fortunately, I happened to pass by and help them escape the danger. To express her gratitude, Madame invited me to a restaurant for drinks. That night, Madame couldn't hold her liquor and mistook me for the Marquis of Yongning. That is how this one night of indiscretion happened, and this child came to be. He raised his head, and his features were strikingly similar to Meng Tingzhou's. Xiao Ke looked at me, Madam. I thought you were just confused from the wine that night, but I never imagined you would give birth to my child, let alone that you would acknowledge the Marquis of Yongning as the father, just to climb into the wealth and glory of the Marquise's household. I furrowed my brows and took a step back. What nonsense are you spouting? I've never even met you. His voice rose a few notches. Jiang Jue, can you say that with a clear conscience? If we were truly strangers, how would I know you have a plum blossom-shaped birthmark on your waist? I paled in shock. You are lying, crack, Meng Tingzhou lost control of his emotions, and the teacup in his hand shattered into pieces. With such private details coming from his mouth, who would believe there was nothing between us, just as things were about to descend into chaos? Old Madame Meng tapped her cane and raised her voice. Enough, enough, all of you shut up. What good will come from all this bickering? The room fell silent. Everyone struck speechless. Why make it so complicated? Just do a blood kinship test. Whether she is innocent or trying to pass off some child of unknown origin, one test will reveal everything. Notify all the clan elders. 7 days from now, invite them to the Marquise's mansion to witness it together. To prevent me from tampering with anything, old Madame Meng took Zhang'er away from me for these 7 days, keeping him under separate watch. He hasn't left my side since birth. Though I can't bear to part with him now, I have no choice. 7 days later, in the main hall of the Marquise's residence, everyone gathered together. For the sake of the Marquise's reputation, old Madame Meng didn't let Zhang'er appear in public. Instead, she kept him in the back room, personally watching over him, and drew out a small bowl of blood. Everything here today was prepared under my supervision. This matter concerns the Marquise's bloodline, so I certainly won't show favoritism. Since none of you have any objections, let's begin. The servant dripped the blood into a bowl of clear water, then handed the silver needle to Xiao Ke. He didn't hesitate and pricked his finger. Ivrion held their breath and watched the result. They merged. What? Meng Tingzhou walked forward in disbelief. Over these past few months, he had already treated Zhang'er as his own flesh and blood. Now that the test showed this result, he couldn't accept it. He took another bowl of blood water and cut his fingertip. They didn't merge. He called the physician forward. Is there something wrong with this water? After carefully examining it, the physician shook his head. Could there be some other trickery? The physician was terrified. My lord, I have already checked carefully. This water, this bowl, this silver needle, they're all clean. No one has tampered with them. Please accept this fact. This child is truly not your flesh and blood. In front of everyone, Meng Tingzhou finally couldn't continue deceiving himself. He furrowed his brow, veins bulging on his forehead. The eyes looking at me were filled with disappointment. Jiang Jie, I trusted you so much, yet you deceived me. A thunderous boom exploded in my ears. My heart was pounding violently, about to leap out of my chest. I shook my head in panic. How is this possible? Janger is the child I carried for 10 months and gave birth to. I know this better than anyone. How could he not be the Marquise's own flesh and blood? How? Li Shiner raised an eyebrow. All this evidence was prepared under mother-in-law's personal supervision. She has always been fair and impartial. Are you saying mother-in-law would deliberately fabricate evidence to frame you, or are you refusing to accept this ironclad proof? The blood throughout my body turned ice cold in an instant. I shook my head, stepped back, my legs weak, nearly collapsing to the ground. Regarding this child's identity, I truly have no way to refute it. All the elders have witnessed this here, haven't they? With so many eyes watching and the evidence irrefutable, what else can you argue? She laughed loudly, tears nearly coming out. What lost legitimate son? He is clearly just a bastard. Jiang Jie coveted wealth and didn't hesitate to risk tainting the Marquise's bloodline. Such a shameless woman should be dragged away and drowned in a pig cage. Why aren't people coming to drag this slut away for execution? Bang! The gate pushed open, and in an instant, sunlight shone straight in, stinging the eyes painfully. The ones who entered, however, were not the servants coming to arrest me, but the attendants from the Marquise's residence. The wet nurse held the newborn baby in her arms, while another servant led Zhonger. Grandmother, father, mother. He stepped forward and bowed. Meng Tingzhou's expression was complicated, not knowing what to say. I half squatted down, pulled him into my arms, and asked softly how he had been eating these past few days, how he had been sleeping, and whether he had been frightened. He shook his head. Grandmother treated me very well. I smiled with relief. Good child, you've been through a lot. Then I led him before everyone. Please look, everyone. Zhonger spread open his hands, displaying them carefully. 10 fingers, completely unharmed. But the baby in the swaddling clothes had the pad of its index finger pricked by a needle tip, the wound still bleeding. Li Shiner realized something was wrong. Her eyes were about to split open with rage, glaring fiercely at me. There. I pointed at the bowl of water on the table. My tone was calm and casual. What was just tested was your child, and you admitted it yourself. The reversal came without warning, and in the vast hall there was dead silence. Jiang Jie. Her voice was almost cracking. You actually tricked me. I nodded calmly. If you truly had a clear conscience, what harm would there be in being tricked by me? Before the blood verification test, I sought out old Madame Meng. She had a habit of going to the small Buddhist hall to chant sutras and pray for blessings on the 15th of every month without fail. I catered to her preferences, copying Buddhist scriptures 100 times in advance, and finally obtained an audience with her. In the small Buddhist hall, I laid out my plan completely. She was puzzled. Ur isn't a child who was lost outside. What is the point of having him do this test? I couldn't expose the fact that Meng Tingzhou was infertile. I could only hint at it tactfully. I walk upright and sit straight. Naturally, I am not afraid of any verification. But I am afraid that Li Shiner, for the sake of her child's future inheritance of the heir position, might use some tricks during the blood verification test to prevent Zhonger from being recognized and returning to the manor. Old Madame Meng was persuaded by me, and finally nodded. She too had harbored doubts in her heart. 10 years. This child didn't come earlier or later, but happened to be conceived right when I had just returned to the capital. To call it coincidence would be too much of a coincidence. The spy I had bribed earlier discovered that Li Shiner and Xiao Ke were old acquaintances. She had previously followed her father when he was demoted and transferred, relocating to Linan at that time. They had suffered much ostracism and were even plotted against by political enemies along the way. Xiao Ke happened to see the injustice and lent a helping hand. The two met when they were nobodies and developed mutual affection. One was a carefree wandering knight, the other a down-on-her-luck noble lady. As time went on, romantic feelings gradually grew. Later, she returned to the capital and married into the marquise's mansion, but the two continued to meet in secret. For the thrill of it, sometimes she would even dress Xiao Ke in Meng Tingzhou's clothes and hide him in the mansion. They would have secret rendezvous at night, and she would secretly send him away before dawn. After all, the two had similar builds and appearances, so even if servants occasionally glimpsed a vague figure, they wouldn't grow suspicious. After I returned, Li Shiner worried about losing her position, so in her desperation, she borrowed seed from Xiao Ke, who bore a striking resemblance to Meng Tingzhou. Xiao Ke had been enamored with her for a long time, so naturally he was willing to do her bidding, helping her fabricate false evidence to frame me. After I left the marquise's mansion back then, many servants who had served me were reassigned to work under Li Shiner. Finding out what birthmarks I have on my body was no difficult task. Xiao Ke sensed something was wrong. He wanted to use his lightness skill to escape with Li Shiner, but as early as last night, Xiao Tang had already added muscle-weakening powder to his food. Now he could only watch helplessly as the servants restrained him and tied him up tightly. A servant came in carrying a tray with a flower on it. The petals were crimson red, vibrant in color. There is a flower in southern Xinjiang called red peony. It is mildly toxic. After consumption, blood activity temporarily changes, allowing anyone's blood to become compatible. As I explained, I collected 3 bowls of blood from Xiao Ke's wound, handing them to Meng Tingzhou and Xiao Tang respectively, keeping the last bowl for myself. Absurd scene unfolded. The 3 of us and Xiao Ke as expected. All were compatible. I also had the physician verify Meng Tingzhou and Zhonger's blood. He stared at the result in the bowl, and only after a long while did he manage to speak with difficulty. He said to Zhonger, "Just now, father wrongly blamed you." Zhonger didn't want to acknowledge him and hid behind me. He had suffered so much grievance these past few days, and now his identity was finally proven. Everyone doubted him. Only I believed in him. I looked at Li Shiner with a carefree smile. "You went through all this trouble, putting on this show today, just to ruin the reputation of U.S. mother and son, to prevent my son from being acknowledged by the Marquis. That way, your child with Xiao Ke could pass off as his and inherit everything from the Marquis in the future. But no matter how carefully you schemed, you still missed something." Tingzhou's eyes were red, staring at her intensely. He questioned her word by word. "When we first married, I promised you a phoenix crown and rosy cape, a grand dowry stretching 10 miles, a glorious wedding. These 10 years I've treated you well. Why did you betray me?" Now that her scheme had been exposed, she simply stopped pretending. "Meng Tingzhou, you heartless, hypocritical scoundrel. When my father was demoted and sent to Lan'an all those years, how many cold looks did our whole family endure? How hard was our life during the most difficult days? It was he who stayed by my side. And you ask yourself, honestly, in all these years, did you ever send a letter to ask how I was? Did you ever lend a helping hand even once? You think I delayed marriage all this time because I was thinking of you, because I couldn't forget you. Don't flatter yourself. It was only because I couldn't marry Xiao Ke, and my father wanted to curry favor with the Marquise's household to pave a bright path for my brother. That is why they schemed to have me marry you." She pointed at Meng Tingzhou, screaming herself hoarse in my eyes. You are the one who is his substitute." This farce ended on a sour note. Xiao Ke was convicted of adultery and attempting to taint the Marquis household's bloodline, and was dragged away to be beaten to death. As for Li Shiner and that child, they were supposed to be executed according to the law as well, but her father and brother couldn't bear it in the end. They stepped in to suppress the rumors and managed to save the mother and son. But committing such shameful deeds truly tarnishes the family's reputation and disgraces our ancestors. The Li family really didn't want to take them back. They had no choice but to send them to the countryside estate to fend for themselves. Not long after Li Shiner was sent there, she went mad, own night she threw herself into the well while holding the child. As for Meng Tingzhou's infertility, the Marquis Manor also uncovered the truth. After he married Li Xin, they still couldn't conceive for a long time. When I was at the Marquis Manor, even though there was no news after 2 years of marriage, I served my mother-in-law every day as if she were my own mother, handling everything personally. Madame Meng was fairly satisfied with me, and seeing that we were both young, she wasn't in a hurry. Later, when Meng Tingzhou remarried, she had quite a few complaints about Li Xin, and seeing that they were getting older, she took charge and arranged for him to take several concubines. With more people in the inner quarters, there came many disputes and jealousies. Li Xin was already fierce and jealous, and seeing all those faces younger than hers, each with their own charms, some plump, some slender, some with heavy makeup, some with light, she couldn't help but fume. She didn't dare defy old Madame Meng, but she could discipline the concubines as the legitimate wife. Those poor concubines suffered under Li Xin's rule. The slightest mistake would get them beaten and scolded at best, or sold off at worst. It wasn't that Meng Tingzhou didn't know her true colors, he just couldn't be bothered to intervene, turning a blind eye and ignoring it all. Later, he happened to meet Miss Yin Yin, who sang for a living on a pleasure boat. Yin Yin had a gentle disposition, delicate and pitiable. She also had a younger brother, and the two siblings depended on each other for survival. To spare her from Li Xin's torment, Meng Tingzhou secretly kept her in a residence he owned on the outskirts of the capital, a golden house to hide a beauty, with fine clothes and delicious food. She had everything except a proper title. No matter how well Meng Tingzhou hid it, he inevitably gave himself away. Li Xin was burning with rage, but since the suburban villa had guards and servants, she couldn't make a move there, so she waited until his brother went out one day to play, grabbed him, and beat him half to death. Yin Yin harbored a grudge in her heart. She knew what Li Xin cared about most and was most anxious about was having an heir. To make Li Xin lose all hope completely, she found a traveling doctor and bought medicine that would make a man infertile. Then, the next time Meng Tingzhou came to see her, she put all the powder into his tea. The dose I used back then was secretly prepared by Xiao Tang. This was done with extreme secrecy, leaving no evidence. And it happened a long time ago. So the matter of Meng Tingzhou being without an heir, after going round and round, was eventually traced back to his mistress. The truth came to light. Meng Tingzhou never expected to be plotted against by the two people he loved most at the same time. It dealt him a heavy blow, and overcome with rage, he fell seriously ill. Bowls and bowls of medicine were poured into him, but he never got any better. Xiao Tang took his pulse for him, and also secretly dug out a package of discarded medicine dregs from under a tree in Li Xin's courtyard. Only then did she discover that from the moment Li Xin learned the gender of the fetus in her belly, she had started poisoning his food, small amounts many times, accumulating day after day. So during the past days, although he appeared fine on the surface, his body had long been hollowed out inside, too far gone to recover. During the days he was sick and recuperating, he spent the most time with me. I strummed the strings just like many years ago at the minister's residence, playing for him, chatting with him about musical scores and melodies. Jiyue, play another piece for me. Ever since I got sick, I've been feeling awful, weak, all over, dizzy with ringing in my ears. He reclined on the small couch, with thick goose down padding underneath, his face haggard, only his eyes still bright. But whenever I hear you play, I feel much better. I smiled, coaxing him in a soft, gentle voice. Then how about I play Spring River Flower Moon Night once more? All right. The music flowed out like a babbling stream, slow and gentle. Meng Tingzhou was immersed in it, his long furrowed brows gradually relaxing, and before long his breathing became even as he slowly fell asleep. It wasn't that my music had some miraculous healing and soothing effect. It was that he was dying. The sachet I wear contains a herb called Wulon grass. It is harmless to ordinary people, but it reacts with the poison Li Xin gave him, conflicting and counteracting. Although it can numb the sense of pain, it will unknowingly accelerate the body's deterioration. Perhaps it is because he is approaching death. These days he always pulls me along, chatting on and off about old times. Jia. He held my hand. Looking back on this life, I've truly loved so many people, but they either schemed against me or betrayed me. The only person who was sincere to me from beginning to end was you, and the person I've let down the most is also you. I lowered my eyes, helped tuck in his blanket, and comforted him. Focus on recovering. There is still a long future ahead. The secret of once drugging him, I plan to keep it hidden until he dies. Who would have thought that his mistress had also given him the exact same sterilizing drug? This blame, somehow someone's taking the fall for me. Why wouldn't I be happy about that this day? I was carrying my chin, and on the way to Meng Tingzhou's courtyard, I ran into Zhang'er, who had just finished his lessons. He was about to head to the study. I stopped him. Come with mother to keep your father company. Talk to him more. He refused, frowning as he reproached me. Mother, when did you change? I explained patiently. You are already the heir now, and you'll inherit everything from him in the future. It wouldn't be good if people noticed that you and your father are estranged. He thought for a moment, found it reasonable, and agreed. With my encouragement, Zhang'er began visiting him more frequently. The conversations between father and son also became more frequent. The chats were nothing more than what he ate today, what he learned, and how he got along with his cousins. Zhang'er was quick-witted, had a photographic memory, and could apply what he learned to new situations. Now he also had the status of the Marquise's heir, with great scholars of the time teaching him and countless precious books at his disposal. With such good conditions, his progress was naturally rapid. Besides that, he also inherited the musical talent from me and his father. After listening to me play for a long time, he taught himself without any instruction. Meng Tingzhou adored him greatly, as expected of our child. This evening, Meng Tingzhou's condition took a turn for the worse. Almost everyone in the manor came. They gathered around Meng Tingzhou, waiting for the final farewell. He saw many people, said many things, and only called for me and Zhang'er at the very end. Meng Tingzhou held the two of us, his eyes filled with reluctance to part. His words were broken, his breath growing weaker, barely able to form sentences. After I die, everything will be left to you and our child. From now on, in the capital, no one will dare bully you two anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, his hand fell limply. His eyes slowly closed, a tear sliding down from the corner of his eye. Old Madame Meng tremblingly stepped forward to check, grief-stricken beyond words. My son, in an instant, everyone in the room burst into tears. I also held Zhang'er and wept bitterly, probably tears of joy. After Meng Tingzhou's death, my son Meng Ruzhang inherited the Marquis title, and in the decades that followed, he passed the imperial examinations, embarked on an official career, entered the Grand Secretariat, and rose steadily through the ranks. To prevent my name from being tied to Meng Tingzhou's, he petitioned before His Majesty and requested an imperial title for me so that I could remain in the Marquis residence as the birth mother of the Marquis of Yongning, to be cared for in my old age. Holding that bright yellow imperial edict, I patted his head like I did when he was little and said, "My son is amazing.